here. Now, what we do on this channel is that we explore a lot within regards to Jewish history, rabbinic history of different, let's just say, Eidat Mizrach countries, North African countries, Ottoman countries, Spanish countries. Today, we're going to explore a bit within regards to the history of the Persian Jews and the Mashadi community over here. Now, we're in the middle of a conflict at the moment between Israel and Iran. We've had this for nearly a week. I'm actually recording this from, as we speak, in Israel. And it's a worrying times. We need to pray for Israel to be safe. Just had rockets fired towards Israel today. We've had, at the time of recording, had for the last week. There's been unfortunately, there's been direct impact. There's been casualties. We have to pray for Israel to be safe. We want a safer world. And want this conflict to, we want Israel to be victorious and there just be blessings all over the world. So I thought I would talk, one of the parts of Iran is an area called Mashad, which the Mashadi Jewish community, I think the vast majority now currently live in New York in an area called Great Neck. So I'm using two excellent articles inside this video, which I'm going to do. One taken actually from the H website and one from the Mizrahi website to encapsulate some of the history within regards to anti-Semitism, maybe the Jewish community actually felt in Mashad respectively, and various other things. First is coming from an article on the H website called The Secret Jews of Mashad. Now, we've spoken about several rabbis in our series, rabbinic series, of the history of Mashadi Jews. So now this is an opportunity to speak more within regards to the history. I think it's actually written by Yehudit Litvak, I believe this article was actually quite recently. It is. She actually brings about that there was a deadly pogrom in the year 1839, and the surviving Jews of Mashad from Iran were forcibly converted to Islam. So I've heard this from family members of mine because obviously I am partly Mashadi, I've got Mashadi heritage. They continued to observe Judaism in secret for several generations. Now, we did a video recorded at the Hilul time of Rabbi Eikler, Rabbi Mordechai Eikler, I believe his name is. We're going to mention him in a minute, but I recommend everyone to watch that, so type his name in online, but let's continue the article. Okay, so this area was located in the Kashaf River Valley between two mountain ranges. Now, Mashad presently is the second largest city in Iran and the capital of the province of Khorasan in northeast Iran. I think it actually borders Afghanistan respectively. So that's why we've actually mentioned some various rabbis also from Afghanistan inside this series. And remember, there was a connection between these two countries and communities, so on and so forth. I believe in its earlier history, let's just say, due to its strategic location, I think it was along this, let's say, the Silk Road, Mashad suffered, let's say, numerous invasions and raids as a general thing. In 1736, the area was conquered by the Iranian ruler at the time, was called Nadir Shah, and Mashad became the imperial capital at that point in time. Until then, at that stage in time, the Jews were not allowed in Mashad, which is considered one of the holy cities of Islam because the burial site of the 8th Imam of Shia Islam is located there. But the Nadir Shah, who was a Sunni and intended to convert the local Muslims to Sunni Islam, decided to change the long-standing policy. He would invite 40 Jewish families to Mashad in order to grow the local economy and increase the city's commercial ties. Now, we've spoken on various occasions on this series within regards to the history of Iran, especially within regards to the Kermani community, where they will bring people in. I've got partly Kermani heritage also, and various other places. They would see that when a Jewish community would actually come there, there'll be a blessing automatically that come and be prosperous. Now, under Nadir Shah's protection, the Jewish community of Mashad grew and prospered, despite there was, at that point in time, open hostility from the local Shiite Muslims. The Jews' commercial activities benefited, let's say, the local Muslims as well, and brought them wealth and prosperity. Now, I believe in the year 1747, the Nadir Shah was assassinated by his enemies, and the Jewish people were expelled to the outskirts of the city and forced to wear identifying marks on their clothes. Remember, this is part of anti-Semitism that happens in many countries where Jewish people will be othered. They had to pay higher taxes and obey many restrictions, such as not using public bathhouses. This is one of the things. Okay, now I believe it was on March the 27th in the year 1839, the Muslims of Mashad were observing their, let's say, holiest day for the Shia sect and the day of mourning for Muhammad's grandson Hussein. Now, the Jewish people in the meantime were preparing for Pesach, which was in 3 days' time. That day, a Jewish woman went to a Persian doctor to seek help for a skin condition on her hand. The doctor recommended that she wash her hand. This was what's said over in the H article website, in dog's blood. Now, the woman hired a Persian boy to catch and kill a dog for her. I'm not too sure, was this halachically allowed? Why would this about? I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to comment on that. So the boy did so, but then got into an argument with the woman about payment. Angry, let's just say, at the woman, the boy stormed off, yelling at the top of his lungs that the Jews killed a dog in order to mock the Muslims. This was what's written here. He claimed that the Jews even called the dog Hussein over here. Now, this rumor spread quickly, and thousands of Muslims, already filled with religious fervor on their holy day, rushed to the Jewish quarter. They murdered, raped, and looted. They desecrated Torah scrolls and set the synagogue on fire. This was, remember, I think we spoke about on a separate video, I think about the Libyan community, if I'm not mistaken, during the mid-1800s, where there was a blood libel connected to the time period of Passover. And this happened on various occasions before, these blood libels. Now, after 35 Jews were murdered and many more were wounded, the surviving Jews of Mashad were forcibly had to convert to Islam. Now, let's say the new Muslims were brought to the mosque and forced to declare their allegiance to Islam. Now, in return, all the previous restrictions were removed. The Jewish people no longer had to pay extra taxes or wear distinctive clothing. They had to take on Muslim names at that point in time. So many people from the Mashadi community, I know people that are called Abdul, and will still have that name. And that was possibly because of these reasons. Their synagogue was converted to a mosque. Outwardly, Mashadi Jews looked and acted no different from their Muslim neighbors. However, despite the special officers appointed to oversee the new Muslims and prevent them from practicing their original faith, Mashadi Jews continued observing Judaism in secret. They married only within their community and taught their children about Jewish roots and Jewish practices. Now, double lives. Now, it's quoted over here on the H website that a woman of the name Rachel Betzaleli. Now, remember, Betzaleli is a Mashadi family name. I personally know some Betzalelis, interesting enough. She happens to be a retired Israeli librarian who left Mashad at age 8. And she's going to recall on the H website in the article, living as a secret Jew. She says, I remember my mother sitting in our home, rolling wicks for the candles, which had to be kosher. She made wine in the basement and wheat knead plus matzah for Pesach. She learned how from her mother, who learned from her mother. They'd give all the maids, let's say, the day off, and they'd cook and bake. On Shabbat, to avoid, let's say, working, the parents would send the children to mind the shops. If someone came in, they'd just say, my father is not here. Could you please come back? I'm proud of how my grandparents and parents managed. It couldn't have been easy. Now, Mashadi Jews had other tricks too, it's reported over. Now, Shabbat candles were always lit undercover, so they couldn't be seen from the windows. Families kept, let's say, dogs and cats, so they could feed them the Muslim meat. And they bought, while they themselves ate kosher meat, they, let's say, shechted, let's say, obviously ritual slaughter in secret, and smuggled home under the woman's chadors or long cloaks. In the market, the Mashadi, they purchased Muslim bread like everyone else, but as they walked home, they gave the bread to the Muslim poor. In their basements, they ground their own wheat and baked their own bread. See the Mesirah Nefesh they had over there. At the same time, Betzalel's family maintained an outward appearance of pious Muslims. This is what's reported over. She quotes over here, my father attended mosque. On Muslim days of mourning, the men would cry and slap themselves. And so did my father. The Jewish men would attend mosque, then gather together, afterwards in secret for the Jewish service. On the day of Ramadan, they'd pretend not to eat. And at night, just like Muslims, they'd set a lavish table, welcoming all Muslims to come and eat. That's what's quoted over. Now, who are the heroic Jewish women of Mashad? We see there's a lot of heroic Jewish people in Mashad over here, what they went through and how they were able to keep their Judaism and their faith. Now, it states over here, the bulk of the work of maintaining Jewish observance in secret fell on the women. It helped that in order to pose as, let's say, good Muslims, they'd had to wear a chador, a traditional Muslim garment that covered them from head to toe. leaving only their faces open. It was tent-like. A chador gave women an opportunity to conceal various Jewish items and transport them from one place to another. Thus, it was illiterate women who brought the men Torah scrolls, tefillin, prayer shawls, talitot, and so on and so forth, and tefillin and other objects, ritual objects. The women also ensured that their families only consumed kosher food. Before Pesach, they would stay up late at night. They bake matzot after their young children would go to bed so that their children wouldn't have to divulge, let's say, to their Muslim neighbors. Raising children and educating them about the Jewish heritage was a main, let's say, job, which was very much an impressive accomplishment of the Mashadi Jewish women. The women married young, and Mrs. Betzaleli recalls, she says over here, it's quoted, "My grandmother was married when she was 9 years old." Now, this there's a source actually within regards to this. I think there's an article from Yocheved Miriam Russo about the double lives of Mashadi Jews. It was actually in the Jerusalem Post in August 22nd, 2007. That was, so I would recommend everyone to search that on the internet. So I think maybe some of this information was actually come from that. So I'll quote again. "My grandmother was married when she was 9 years old." Now, it's interesting. I know that my grandmother personally, I think she got married when she was 15, if I'm not mistaken. Her aunt married at 6. That way, if a Muslim asked to marry them, they were already committed. This was a trick that enabled the Jews of Mashad to marry within their community, despite the pressure from local Muslims to intermarry. Now, the women raised large families also. Life was difficult and medical care, let's say, was primitive. Many Mashadi children, unfortunately, did not survive childhood. Those that reached adulthood remember their mother's devoted care for them, as well as constant worry and many precautions they had to take to keep their families safe. Now, Mrs. Betzaleli recalls also, I'll quote again the Ish article, "My mother was very strict with us. I wasn't even allowed to go to my best friend's home alone. My friend was Persian, and that was okay, but I couldn't go to her home unless one of our maids came with me. That upset me sometimes because I wanted to be able to do the same my friends did. Now I understand why my mother was so cautious. She had the responsibility of raising 8 children in a very dangerous country. She had to be very careful about what she allowed us to do." So you can see. Now about the Rabbanim. Now we've spoken about one of the rabbis over here. It says here, like every Jewish community, the 3 secret Jews of Mashad needed rabbis to teach them Torah and to, let's say, conduct religious ceremonies. In the generation of the forced conversion, the existing rabbis continued to perform their duties in secret. But they worried about the subsequent generations. One of the first rabbis was named Rabbi Raphael Eikler. He would have a son called Rabbi Mordechai Eikler, who was born in the 1850s. Now, we've spoken about him before in a separate video. We didn't speak about so much about Rabbi Raphael Eikler. I'd like to maybe... Eikala, I think you can pronounce his name. From a young age, Rab Mordechai loved learning and showed a special gift of other languages. In the school, Rab Mordechai learned about Islam and mastered the Persian language. At home, his father taught him Torah, and Rab Mordechai would apply himself with unusual diligence, becoming a Torah Talmid Chacham, and he would also learn how to perform Brit Milah, circumcision. He'd become a shochet, ritual slaughter, and other, let's say, duties within regards to rabbinate. Now, I believe his father passed away in the 1883. He would have been about 33 years of age. Rabbi Mordechai Eikela became the unofficial rabbi of the Mashadi Jews. He officiated at many secret Jewish weddings. He did a lot of Brit Milot, circumcision of Jewish babies, and helped the local Jews with obtaining kosher meat. In the evenings, under the cover of darkness, Rabbi Eikela would visit local families and teach their children Torah. The rabbi would not accept any payment for his services. Seeing a need, Rabbi Eikela translated, let's say, classic Jewish texts such as Sidurim, prayer books, the liturgy of the Pesach Haggadah into Persian. The books, first handwritten and later printed in Jerusalem, I think they're even still available today. Now, Rabbi Eikela was able to leave Mashad and move to Jerusalem eventually in 1927. He'd be 77 years of age at the time. His son would become Rabbi Raphael Eikela, remained in Mashad and continued his father's work. Now, a British subject in Mashad. What's this? Towards the end of the 19th century, there's a name named James Bassett, was a Christian missionary. He visited Mashad. He would write in his book that about 300 Jewish families lived in Mashad, all of them called Jadid, or new ones, in reference to their recent conversion of Islam. Clearly, decades after the forced conversion, the Jews still constituted a distinct population of Mashad. Now, Bassett will actually tells of Benjamin, one of the most influential Jews in the city. I think just a source for this is, once again, I think in his book, I think it's in Scribner's Sons in 1886. So he would talk about it. He would say, who was one of the British subjects. Britain had been involved in an armed conflict with Afghanistan. When the British were ambushed and cruelly massacred by the Afghans, 2 British officers were rescued by Benjamin's father, who assisted them, let's say, in the escape from Afghanistan. The British wanted to reward their Jewish rescuer for his help. Unfortunately, Benjamin's father's involvement was discovered and he was executed by the Afghans. On further investigation, the British found out that Benjamin, the rescuer's young son, had been taken to Mashad. Britain granted Benjamin's British citizenship, appointed a guardian for him, and paid him pension of 70 rupees per month for the rest of his life. Now, Bassett describes Benjamin at the time of their meeting as a man in middle life. He seemed to be well-disposed and desirous, let's say, that his children should receive a British education. There was escape attempts also quoted in Aish website over here. Yearning to live openly as Jews, many new Muslims, let's just say, new Muslims, attempted to leave Mashad. They had to be extremely careful because renouncing Islam in a Muslim country was liable to the death penalty. Some secret Jewish people moved to other cities within Iran and joined the existing Jewish communities over there. They changed their names and concealed their city of origin. Others managed to leave Iran and form new Jewish communities, for example, in Afghanistan, the Russian Empire, and even in India. So I think I know some Indian Jews. In the 1890s, several secret Jews of Mashhad came up with a very, very brilliant idea. The local Muslim authorities encouraged very much the new Muslims, let's say, to undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca. Some had gone and, upon returning, received the status of a Haji and a more influential position in Mashhad. When several Mashhadi Jews embarked, let's say, on this pilgrimage, their true destination was not Mecca, but to Jerusalem. On the way back from Mecca, they escaped from the caravan and managed to reach Jerusalem when they settled and established 2 synagogues, the synagogue of Haji Yehezkel and the synagogue of Haji Adoniyahu. These synagogues, I think, actually currently are located in the Bukhari neighborhood of Jerusalem and are still active today. Very interesting. We visited the Bukhari neighborhood on numerous occasions here on this series. Now there was a blood libel and the leaving of Mashhad. It's written in the article. For almost a century, Jews of Mashhad continued living double lives. In 1925, when Reza Shah Pahlavi came to power, he brought religious freedoms to Iran. The Jews of Mashhad celebrated, and they didn't have to hide their identities anymore. I think shortly before Pesach in 1946, the Jewish community of Mashhad were once more attacked by a violent anti-Semitic mob that accused them of using the blood of Muslim children for their matzah. Remember, this is a classic blood libel over here. The anti-Semitism at its highest. The Jews fled for their lives, the majority settling in Tehran. Others managed to leave Iran for other countries. Now, after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, religious persecution and anti-Semitism returned to Iran in full force. Many Jews fled Iran. Among them were the Jews of Mashhad and their descendants who relocated to Tehran. Now, the Mashhadi Jewish community today, we've spoken about it, I'm partly part of it, let's just say. I think the Mashhadi Jews, obviously, it's a very close-knit community. I think there's communities in Europe, especially there was in England, a bigger one, northwest London there was. In the United States, there was a huge one in Great Neck. And in Israel, they built synagogues and communities. Obviously, many of the strong traditions are kept in. Many people just marry with other Mashhadim also. I think in the United States, in Great Neck, has the largest population of Mashhadi Jews. I think there's a woman of the name Talia Basali. She happens to be a descendant of Mashhadi Jews. She wrote, I think in 2015, there was an article, I think, where it was in the yuobserver.org, I think it's taken from, if I'm not mistaken. This was, I'm using the sources here that's kindly been put on the Aish website. The Mashhadi community is deeply traditional while also moving forward into the modern world. Torah values in Tao. Tremendous importance is placed on education, Jewish and otherwise, ensuring a connection between past, present, and future. Passionate support of the Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, is also a central focus to the community, as it is a dream our ancestors never even dreamed of, and one of our grandparents saw came true. Just like every Jewish community, around the world. We bring our distinct, uniting history and culture as a meaningful contribution to the world around us. We offer a unique flavor to the diverse family that is the Jewish people. So I recommend everyone to learn more about the Mashadi community. Now, there's a lot more articles. I would love to say there's some from the Mizrahi website. Let's just push your time because it's about to be just before Shabbat, but it's very, very interesting. A special edition over here. Now, friends, subscribe to the channel. We're near 7,000 subscribers. We're a community here, exploring the history of the Jewish people, especially from the Sephardic countries over here. And this is a special edition with regards to the Mashadi community. I'm actually doing this at a time where there's a conflict of Iran and Israel. So I thought to just see the anti-Semitism that's come from Iran over the years, I thought would be very appropriate. So wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. Take care and blessings and pray for Israel. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I appreciate very much all the good feedback.